The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I welcome you to the webinar, the first webinar to the final InterCor TESTFEST on cross-border interoperability. It's 2 o'clock now and 1 minute already. So I can see that attendees are still coming in. So I propose to wait another minute before we actually start the webinar. Okay, I would say we could start now. It's 3 minutes past 2. The number of participants is stabilizing, let's say. So once again, welcome to the first webinar to the final InterCor TESTFEST, which is on cross-border interoperability. My name is Peter Schmitting. I'm working for InterCor, and I'm the moderator of this session. So I'm doing a bit at the start, and then later on the technical people come in. So as the introduction, you see here who you are going to listen to this afternoon. First of all, it's me. I'm the activity leader of the InterCor activity TESTFEST. So the other speakers are Peter Louis of the Agentschap Wegen en Verkeer of Belgium. So he's the project manager for this InterCor pilot in Flanders. Then we have Axel Sandbergen for Rijkswaterstaat, who is the test manager for the TESTFEST in the Netherlands. We have Öne Kerstjens, he's project manager for the province of North Brabant. And we will have Guillaume Richard, who is the CITS project manager at IDnomic, and he's going to talk about PKI related topics. The other three are going to talk about the different test sites where the TESTFEST is actually going to take place. So the other speakers here are only of interest for the later part of the internal webinar. And so this is only interesting for InterCor internal people. So please, the next slide. Some rules, let's say, for this webinar. As you may have recognized, you're all muted during the presentation to avoid that 50 people start talking at the same time. But you can ask questions. For that, you use the control panel that you should see on the right, and you write your questions. During the presentation, best is if you refer to the slide number, which is always on the top right-hand side of each slide. And then I will stop the presentation of the other speakers from time to time, and then we discuss these questions and hopefully answer them. If not, we take them as a homework and we'll answer them later. The whole webinar is going to be recorded, and this recording is going to be posted on the InterCor website afterwards. And from the questions you ask, we will compile a frequently asked questions document that will also be put onto the InterCor website. So to the next slide, please. So the content of this webinar, we have the introduction to InterCor, which I'm going to talk about. This is a very short section because I think most people that are attending this webinar know about InterCor already. Then more interesting, the TESTFEST objectives. That's going to be Peter Louily. Then the pilot sites and services in Belgium and the Netherlands. That's going to be Peter, Axel and Öne to talk about that. Then the specification and the security. That's again Peter and Guillaume. Then the program, the venue and the conference. This is Peter Louily. And then at the end, I'm going to conclude the webinar. So another Peter, that's Peter Schmitting, that's me. And afterwards, we have this InterCor partners only continuation of the webinar where we discuss project internal things. So please, the next slide. So ARTICO, what is it? It's InterCor is a study of 1,530 kilometers. I don't know if this is still holding, of 4 member states under the 10T core road network connecting from the North Sea, Mediterranean to the Arc Atlantic corridor. That's where the pilot sites are. So to the next slide, please. The InterCor is a CEF, so Connecting Europe Facility project. It started already September 2016, and the official end date is August 2019, where we are thinking about having an extension and run the project into 2020. The overall budget is 30 million euros with a 50% funding. There are 16 partners from the 4 member states. The lead in each member state is taken mostly by ministry. So in the Netherlands, it's the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment. The Dutch colleagues are also coordinator in that project. Then we have the French Ministry for Ecology, Sustainable Development and Energy. In Belgium, the Flemish Department of Mobility and Public Works. And in UK, the Department of Transport. So 4 member states. That means 4 pilot sites, where the pilot sites are not necessarily all in one location. They may be a bit scattered over several locations in the member state. And then which services are we having? Well, we're talking about day 1 services in 4 member states, and also a first assessment of services that are in the area of freight and logistics. So for the traffic management, we have in-vehicle signage, probe data, roadworks warning, and closer, the green light optimized speed advice. And in freight and logistics, there is going to be some work going on in multimodal cargo transport optimization and truck parking. So next slide. So now for the TESTFEST, we are now on the 4th TESTFEST. You see 5 bullets that may be a bit misleading, but I will explain. So the first TESTFEST took place in the Netherlands in July 2017 in Dordrecht. It concentrated on ITSG5 communication for the services roadworks warning, IVS and probe vehicle data. Then the second TESTFEST was focused on PKI in April 2018 in Reims. It basically concentrated on the same services but added the PKI to it. Then we had the hybrid TESTFEST in October 2018. Again, the same services but with hybrid communications, that is ITSG5 and cellular. And to prepare that, there was a pre-hybrid TESTFEST in Helmond in June 2018, a 2-day event that was used to test the cellular and ITSG5 communication, especially on the service closer. So that was basically like a test run for the hybrid TESTFEST. And now the topic of the present webinar is the cross-border interoperability TESTFEST, which we're going to have in March 2019. The services again, roadworks warning, IVS, probe vehicle data, CLOSA, and it's going to take place in Antwerp from March 25 to 28. And for the InterCor partners, there is some pre-testing and inter-frontier testing in the week before that. And that is all I have to say. So I'm going to mute myself and going to monitor the questions you're going to ask, and I hand over to the other Peter Luli. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Luli. I am from the Flanders Agency for Roads and Traffic, talking about the main objective of the TESTFEST, which is to validate the cross-border interoperability of our deployed day one services in the 4 member states, as said by Peter Schmitting, which is roadworks warning, in-vehicle signage, glossa, and probe vehicle data. We will do that by driving vehicles of the 4 member states in all of the 4 member states. Together with the third-party participants, we will test I2V and V2I communications, both in ITSG5 and cellular IP-based channels. We will use both real and simulated service information distributed directly into vehicles and collect the data from the participating vehicles, being PVD. We will investigate and assess the performance of those communication technologies and use all the findings to support the European harmonization of CITS technology. Now we will talk about the pilot sites and the specifications used for the TESTFEST. I will do this together with Dutch colleagues Axel and Koene. The pilot sites are located for Belgium, Flanders, it's near Antwerp. In the Netherlands, it's Helmond and Dordrecht. All 3 sites are located at about 1 hour, 1 hour, 20 minutes drive from each other. In Antwerp, we will have the following use cases: the roadworks warning, lane closure, and the planned mobile roadworks, IVS dynamic speed limits and dynamic lane management information, vehicle and event data collection, and then time to green and time to red for glossa. Our pilot site is, as said, located near Antwerp. We equipped the E3, part of the E313 highway and the E34 highway with ITSG5 roadside units, and equipped and changed 2 intersections on the N12 near Schelde. The same information is also distributed through our interface 2 IP-based interface, which happens to cover all Flemish motorways. The ITSG5 channel on the 2 highways and the N12 consists of 25 roadside units, mainly placed on gantries as portrayed in this photo. On the green locations, we will have IVS and roadworks warning. On the purple locations, it will be roadworks warning, of course, with PVD added. And as said, the yellow part, the yellow 2 locations is glossa, being the test site in Schelde, N12 Waterstraat, and N12 Liersebaan. Now I go over to my Dutch colleagues for their pilot site presentation.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yeah, maybe the next slide already. We will be opening the pilot site again in Dordrecht, which we also used, was also the basis for the first TESTFEST. It will be on the motorway A16 from Dordrecht to Rotterdam, from kilometer with 37 to 22. That is actually from a bit south of Dordrecht, south of the tunnel, to almost the border of Rotterdam. The trajectory is both north and southbound, so there will be signs on each direction, and it also includes the tunnel itself. So next slide. Some pictures of the site. You can see that it's a very busy motorway. In this case here, it's 4 lanes. It differs over the stretch, but it's very congested and quite intense. You also see the overhead variable message signs on the picture. Those are, it's called MTM, the Motorway Traffic Management System in the Netherlands. And that's also the signs that we'll be using for IVI messages. And on the right, you see the trajectory from the south of Dordrecht, where the red dot is. That's our control center, or our, how do you say that? Our test center, up to the north near Rotterdam, so almost to the bridge across the river. Yeah, that stretch. Thank you. Okay, the setting, real life highway setting. So we'll be working in real life environment. It's a hybrid system, just as Peter also explained for Belgium. We have both IGST5 and cellular via the IF2 interface. We have 13 roadside units. We have the cellular part via IF2. We have the security implemented version 1.2.1 as regular. Use cases supported, roadworks warning, IVS, pro vehicle data. And we also have collision risk warning, which is comparable to roadworks warning, then a message warning for a vehicle standing still. That is interesting for people who can support that. There's one gantry that sends that message. We have the DENA messages, IVI messages, and of course we collect the cams, which is important. All our scenarios are virtual. We have not real life scenarios. That's intentionally on purpose, because you probably, the guests will arrive during lunchtime or during the day, and then there will not be much of messages on the overhead gantries. That's during congestion mostly. So it's not really practical to use the real life messages. So we use only virtual messages. And we also have a special test on one beacon, where we will be sending, at least we'll try to do that, send DENA messages with an AA with certificates, with signatures that are on the revocation list. So if in fact, if you have to correct CRL, which Guillaume will be talking about later, you should be able to not pick up or not display, or you should be able to pick it up but not display this specific message. Okay, next one. Just as an example, some of the scenarios we'll be having. This example is just a snapshot of the total trajectory, and it shows a denim of a trailer, and also the IVI messages, the 90s and an arrow pointing left, and 70s and red crosses that will be sent in IVI messages. Okay, and last but not least, the contacts. If you have any further information, please contact me, Axel Zandbergen, or Edwin van der Wallen. If it's more general, any of us, you can always contact, and we'll reply as soon as possible. I think that's it. Oh, Helmut, Una.
Area. Hello. Good afternoon to you all. I think I've been demuted now. I already started the presentation. I will restart quickly. I will present to you a little bit the testing environment in Helmond, where the GLOSA use case has been made operational. We really are basing ourselves upon the pre-TESTFEST configuration that we have been using within InterCor in June last year. You can also, perhaps if you have been there or participated already, you will recognize the trajectory. There are in total, there are 7 intelligent controllers that will be used. 3 of them are exactly working in the same configuration as they were in June last year. 4 of them will receive an update, and it depends a little bit on the planning thereof the coming weeks, if they will be available for the final TESTFEST, yes or no. But the 3 that you can see, 603, 604, 605, will be available. They will be working conform the InterCor profile specifications, and can be used for the final TESTFEST. What in Helmond we have not activated at this moment is PKI. We are planning to activate PKI after the final TESTFEST in April or May, together with some other areas in the Netherlands, version 1.3.1. And in order to be compliant with the InterCor agreements and specifications, we decided not to activate PKI during the final TESTFEST, where onboard units that will be used will be capable of using PKI version 1.2.1. So that in a nutshell is the testing environment in Helmond. The spot and map messages that will be broadcast on this stretch will also be available through a cloud service across interface 2 specifications InterCor, similarly again as in June last year. And the contact for getting a login and being able to connect to this service can be received if you contact my contact details, which might be on one of the further slides. So this in a nutshell is the technical environment in Helmond. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? No. This should be for Peter.
Oh, yes, Guillaume, we can hear you, but I think Peter Louis, you should say something to this. But he's
sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Sorry. So about the baseline specifications, the documents will be published on the InterCor website, or maybe they are already at the moment. The specifications are in the milestone documents, first being the milestone 3, being the ITS G5 profiles. There's 3 more documents containing the map and SPAT profiles. Then we have the milestone 4 specifying the IP-based interface 2. Some words about that later. Then milestone 5 containing the PKI specifications and the certificate policy. This is what Guillaume will be talking about next. Milestone 6, that contains the use case descriptions. And then we have a description of the common log format that the 4 countries agreed to with an InterCor version 0.7.7, which the 4 countries use just to make evaluation a lot easier. Okay, now we go to Guillaume. Sorry about earlier.
No problem, thank you. I'm Guillaume from iDynamic. iDynamic will provide the common elements, common PKI elements for the TESTFEST. So I will present the general overview of the PKI for the TESTFEST. Then the next slide is about the an overview of the scenarios and then the planning to prepare this TESTFEST. So the TESTFEST will be based on different PKIs. So we have the member state PKIs that you can see top of the slide. So we have the 4 member states, and then there will be also the PKIs of the third parties. Those PKIs, it's the standard mode. They will provide the authorization tickets for the stations so that they can sign the messages. But we have created what we call the online TESTFEST distribution center that will gather different things. The first thing is what we call the common CTL. This is the CTL where you will find all the certificates of the route authorities of the different participants, so the 4 member states and the third parties. There will be the common, what we call the common CRL. This is the CRL that will gather all the contents of the CRLs of the different PKIs. So this is something that to make the test easier. I will talk later of what should be in the CRL, possibly the revoked AA according to the scenarios. And you will also find on the distribution center the different certificates of the authorization authorities that all the station will need to validate and to authenticate the signature of the messages. So first remark is, if needed for the third parties that will not have the PKIs, you can contact the Flanders contact that is written here to arrange something to get valid ATs for the TESTFEST. The idea is to have 2 valid ATs per station so that you can test. So this is the first thing. The second one, which would be the first actually, is that is the version of the standard that you should be compliant with. It's the version 1.2.1 of the certificate formats. Important points, all the stations must be able to access the online distribution center remotely. So we will provide the URL where you will be able to get all the elements that I described before, and to be as close as possible to the real life. The idea is to connect this remotely, so all the stations must be able to contact the distribution center to get that. We will see after in the planning slide, but to build those common elements, we of course need all the certificates, the root certificates, the AA certificates. So you will have to provide this to IDnomic, and of course we will be pleased to help on what is needed to build that. And last remark is that all the messages exchanged over IF2 will be on-site. So these security elements are for the ITSG5 interface. So regarding the scenarios, the first statement, top of the slide again, is that most of the test scenarios outside security, I mean, will be based on the normal security, meaning that this is not a PKI TESTFEST, so most of the scenarios will use the normal security with valid root certificates, valid AA certificates, valid tickets, and so on. So most of the tests will be based on that. However, we would like to test specific security and PKI scenarios. We have defined 1 as mandatory and 2 as optional. And the idea is to go a bit further on the security testing and to keep in the same time to keep it as simple as possible. So the idea is that those 3 scenarios are based on simple configuration so that we can test it. So the first one, the mandatory one, is to test an untrusted RCA. So we will have one roadside unit that is configured with tickets that are not from a trusted root CA, meaning specifically that they are not in the common CTL. So the idea is that all the participants on board units, vehicles, are able to detect that the messages signed from this RSU are not valid, and detect that this is a non-trusted RCA. We also have defined two optional scenarios. The first one is from a revoked AA, so it's kind of not valid signed messages, but not from the same source of untrust, I would say. So the idea is again to have one RSU with tickets that are signed from by a revoked AA. So the same. The participants that will would like to test that will have this RSU available so that they can test the revoked AA. And same for the expired ATs, so the tickets, authorization tickets that are not valid anymore. The idea is to have expired tickets that will have to be generated before, so that they are invalid during the TESTFEST. And again, the idea is that those who want can test the signature by a wrong AT, expired AT. In terms of data logging, I'm not sure this is compliant with the log document that has been provided, but I just put the main information. But I think it is obvious. But the idea is to be able to check what kind of error and to invest and to be sure that we can investigate in case of errors in the test cases. Regarding the planning, so today is the 14th. The idea is to provide the first common CTL with the 4 member states certificates. We are still missing some certificates, but it is a matter of hours or days. But the idea is to be able to provide the first version of the common CTL as soon as possible, and a common CRL as well that will be empty for the moment. The idea is that all the participants have this common CTL and common CRL to make sure that their development and maybe unit testing activities are online with these elements. For the third parties, so we are almost done for the member states root certificates to put in the common CTL. For the third parties that will provide their root certificates, the IDs and the AA certificates as well, the idea is that for the 1st of February, we have all these certificates so that we can provide for the second webinar, the 18th, the common CTL with all the root certificates that will be used for the TESTFEST. Depending on for the revoked AA, also we will have to organize that and put that in the common CR. 1st of March, we will provide on the online distribution center those items so that they are available for all the participants from the online repository. And the idea is that until the 8th of March, they test so that we can confirm before the TESTFEST that all the participants have access to the common PKI elements of the TESTFEST. That's it for me.
Okay. Then about our InterCor IF2 IP-based interface. This is the interface that the InterCor member states agreed on for message exchange between member states themselves and between member states and service providers. Each member state has or will have at least one IF2 server covering their region. Some member states will have multiple IF2 servers. The principle is that vehicles or applications subscribe to their service provider, and the service provider in turn, connects through the IF2 interface to the IF2 server from the region they're driving in. The IF2 interface uses AMQP version 0.91, and the security of the IF2 is connection security, which includes username and password authentication and TLS. The security between the service provider and the vehicle or application, we see that as the responsibility of the service provider itself. And as Guillaume already mentioned, for testing purposes during the TESTFEST, all messages exchanged on the IF2 servers will be unsigned. To request access to the IF2 servers of each member state, you should contact the member states themselves, and all contact details will be online in this presentation. So when we put this online, you can check the presentation and contact the respective parties, either for Flanders and the Netherlands, or if you are a French partner and you want to have our data through the French contact point, you can contact Hassan. The UK contact point is not mentioned here because the UK part says they keep it for InterCor partners only at the moment. Using IF2 will also enable you to have early access to our messages, and that would enable you to pre-test any of your systems, except of course anything PKI related, because the messages will be unsigned. Test scenarios. Well, for third-party participants and for testing purposes, we plan to use published scenario testing on certain parts of our pilot sites, which means that either you will know what to expect, or you will know that whatever you see should correspond to actual signs. On the other hand, also for validation purposes on other parts of the pilot sites, we plan to run scenarios unknown to the participants so that you do not know in advance what to expect. More details to follow in webinar 2. Also, all documents I referred to here and more examples, we plan to publish them as soon as possible and at January 31st at the latest. Concerning the venue, the TESTFEST location is the Ramada Plaza Hotel, which is in Antwerp. Rooms for participants are provided at 89 euros per night. If you book at the hotel, you can tell them either by phone or by email that you book for the TESTFEST for TESTFEST purposes, and then they can give you that rate. The preliminary program is as follows. From Monday till Thursday, there will be open road testing. On Monday and Wednesday, we will focus on roadworks warning, IVS, and PVD. Whereas on Tuesday, we will focus on Glossa. Tests will be both in Belgium and the Netherlands. And more explaining what I mean with focus is that if we do, for example, a focus on Glossa, in the Netherlands, Glossa is done in Helmond. People are also free to visit sites in Dordrecht or the site in Antwerp. But if we provide lunch in, for example, Helmond at that afternoon, then people testing in Dordrecht or testing in Antwerp at that time, they will have to provide for their own lunch. More details to follow where lunch will be in the next webinar. On Wednesday evening, we foresee a social dinner. Separate registration is still to follow. On the Thursday, next to the open road testing, we organize a small conference with high-level speakers giving their views on cross-border interoperability in the morning. And in the afternoon, we plan a technical session with a part explaining and presenting the TESTFEST results and presenting the InterCor deployment guidelines, which should be ready by then, or should be published by then. Then I still have to tell you some preliminary safety rules, being that a safety briefing is scheduled each morning and attendance is mandatory. The second is all drivers must be accompanied, because we are using virtual or simulated information which might not correspond to actual signage. The HMI should be used by passengers only and not by the driver, just to keep it safe. Participants are to ensure that their vehicles are appropriately insured and that they should obey all local traffic rules. They are not priority vehicles. Participation is not only for InterCor members, but it's subject to registration. So you should register, and then depending on the scope of your participation and the availability of places, you will be allowed to participate. You participate at your own expense, and you provide your own test vehicle, devices, and peripherals. We kindly request to have a navigation system with the pilot locations or trajectories programmed up front, just to avoid getting lost. We will provide a TESTFEST WhatsApp group to inform you about the status and availability of the services, and in case of emergencies or heavy traffic jams, we can inform you through the WhatsApp group. InterCor partners are required to share their data. On the other hand, other participants, they can do that voluntarily, but they are required to share their findings if they relate to interoperability. Participants should allow the processing of their data for research, evaluation, and reporting purposes by our partners. And well, we are not liable in case that we have unexpected events on the motorway or equipment fails for any reason. We assume that ITS stations are able to pass the previous ETSI plug tests. Well, not the upcoming one, because that one is still to follow. And then I go over back to Peter Schmitting to explain some other things further. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I have to say thanks to all the speakers so far. I have been looking at the questions tag of the webinar here, and I can see that I have about 0 questions. So either people are a bit shy asking questions, or we were so clear that there are no questions to be asked. So again, I invite all attendees. We have still a few minutes left. If you have a question, just type it. But if you don't have the question now and it comes to you later, you will see that you can contact us also later, and we can answer questions later. So here the registration. For registration, you go to the InterCor website, and there you will find, once you have gone to the TESTFEST tab in that site, on the top you see it's TESTFEST, and you choose Cross-border Interoperability TESTFEST. You get to this page, and there's a Register Here button, and if you go there, you can register for the TESTFEST. And a bit below you see there's also the registration button for the second webinar. And now I can see there are some questions coming in. There's a question from Ola Martin Lykia. I hope I'm pronouncing that not completely wrong. The question is there a document for the CAM and DEM profile also? Well, isn't that our milestone 3 deliverable that is on the InterCor website also? Can any of you answer that if there's a CAM and DEM profile? Well, I think that is.
A denim profile there is most certainly. A CAM profile, I should check whether it's in there. We will get back to you on that.
Yeah, and the second question is more technical. It's from Peter Molion about will there be a recording of the webinar online? Yes, it will be, because Peter missed the first part of the webinar, obviously, and it's yet another Peter here. So that's it so far for the questions. And where was I? I told you that it's how to register. Then the second webinar is scheduled for the 18th of February at 2 o'clock again. So as you have seen on the page before, you can register on the InterCor website. And if we go, that's exactly the picture. And if we go in on, I think there's one slide left with some contacts. Yeah, exactly. This is the contact. So if you have any questions, then you can contact me, or you can contact the Flanders colleagues directly. They have a dedicated internet address that you see here. And the best is if you send a mail to both of us, then you make it more sure that somebody answers. And now I have another question from Pierre Dubois. He asked, what is the agenda of the next webinar? I think the next webinar is going to be more on the technical details of the different test sites, I assume, and on the test scenarios that will be under test. Is this correct, Peter?
Yes, it will be more detailed trajectories and the published scenarios, and yes, more technical. Also, a bit more details about the venue, how to get there, parking, and related stuff.
So according to the venue, maybe I have a question. It's the Ramada Hotel in Antwerp, and I assume as there's a special price, there's a block booking made for that. What is the latest date we can get that block booking?
I should check. I don't know that by heart.
Okay. So, but I guess it's a restricted number of rooms, I would assume. So if you want to come and profit of that, of this promotional rate, I think you should be fast. I guess it's on a first come, first served basis.
Yes.
And did I understand correctly? It's just you contact the hotel and say it's for the ITS.
It's for the InterCor TESTFEST.
InterCor TESTFEST, and then they know about it.
Yes.
And then I have a question from Simon Klein, again more on the organizational aspect. If the slides will be available for download after the webinar, yes, they will be put on the InterCor website and you can download them from there. Ooh. Well, I guess we are through with our program, or is there anything we missed? You can wait a minute or two for further questions. And I think afterwards we have, for the InterCor colleagues, we have an internal webinar that will be on a different license. So if you do not If you do not have received an invitation, send us a mail and we send it to you, the invitation and the access data. Another question coming in from Remy Tuyot. Which protocol and version will OBUs use to enroll and then to download AT certificates from EA/AA? Yes, that is a question for Guillaume, probably.
We'll get.
Not sure. Go ahead, Peter.
I say we get back to you on that.
Okay. Any more questions, please? Okay, now I have a question. What extra subjects will be handled in the following webinar at 1500 from Tom de Munter? Well, that is about the on-the-road event we have a week before the TESTFEST, which is open only to InterCor partners. The test sites and details about testing there.
Yeah, it's about the UK and France part of the TESTFEST. So then I would suggest that we take a break till 3:05 and the InterCor partners move over to the other webinar. Any people that didn't receive the registration link for the InterCor only webinar, they should contact either me or Peter Schmitting, and we will send you the registration link.